Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Melissa, and I'm really excited to welcome you all to Civic Saturday. I really appreciate you all taking time out of your day to be here and spend part of this gloomy morning together. I want to start by all of us just taking a deep breath together. I want to be present and a little more relaxed. I'm weirdly nervous, even though I know we're all friends here. So we all just want to close our eyes and take a deep breath. And breathe out. I'm here in beautiful Vancouver, which, like the rest of Clark County, is ancestrally Cowlitz tribal land. Especially as we consider our civic responsibility today, it's vital to honor those who came before us and acknowledge the long history of what is now Southwest Washington State. This area has been home to the ancestors of the Cowlitz Indian tribe for thousands of years, with its rich, with its rich resources, and have enabled the Cowlitz people to flourish, and they have stewarded the land with their traditions and culture. Today, we must appreciate the persistence of the Cowlitz people and the important role that they play in this region, as together we steward this land for all of our descendants. I also want to take a minute and acknowledge the rise in anti-Asian violence, particularly here in this week in the wake of the tragic shooting in Atlanta. I'm South Asian, and a lot of my experience has been shaped by the xenophobia and hate that followed 9/11. And really to see the Southeast Asian community experiencing the same cycle of targeted racism and violence really rise in the last year has been hard, especially in the last week. There's additional pain in seeing the system that is meant to protect us seemingly try to downplay the reality of these crimes. I just want to let people know, fear and anxiety is valid, to be there for each other. I also want to say it's important for us to not co-opt the Black Lives Matter movement. I know for some, it felt like a natural piggyback to respond to this pain with the idea of Asian lives matter, but in contributing to the erasure of violence against the Black community, we're ultimately only benefiting the system of white supremacy that hurts everyone. We all have to be good allies to each other because we're not safe until all of us are safe. We have some really great artists here today. I hope you sing along at home and feel moved. I do want to mention that the original spoken word piece today includes a couple uncensored curse words. So you have a heads up for that. It's a very powerful piece. I hope you all join us after this on Zoom for Civic Circles. You can register at the link here, and we will prompt you to hop on at the end. We'll pose a small group question for us to all discuss. It'll be interactive and hopefully thought-provoking. And I do want to say thanks to all the amazing people that are making this gathering happen today, from the technical help to volunteering to read or share poetry and song. I really couldn't do this alone. I'm grateful for everybody giving their time and ideas. I also appreciate everybody's understanding as we navigate this experience virtually. So we'll get started, and I'll turn it over to the wonderful people that we have here today.
Hello, hi. My name's Kathy Corbett. I live in Denver, Colorado. I was just tickled pink that that Alyssa invited me to be a part of this today. I am not a professional ukulele player. I actually am a consultant architectural historian, but I thought I chose a song to play now, just to kind of get things going. That is by a very well-known artist, Stevie Wonder, who has, his music has helped me get through difficult patches in my life for basically my entire life. So this song is called As, and it's, in my interpretation, an anthem to the idea that love is eternal. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. As around the sun, the earth knows she's revolving, and rosebuds know to bloom in early May. Just as hate knows love's the cure, you can rest your mind assured that I'll be loving you always. As now can't reveal all that's born is new. You know what I say is true, that I'll be loving you always, until the rainbow burns the stars out in the sky. Always, until the ocean covers every mountain high. Always, until the dolphin flies and parrots live at sea. Always, until we dream of life and life becomes a dream. Did you know that true love asks for nothing? Her acceptance is the way we pay. Did you know that life has given love a guarantee to last through forever and another day? Just as time knew to move on since the beginning, and the seasons know exactly when to change. Just as kindness knows no shame, know through all your joy and pain, that I'll be loving you always. As today I know I'm living, but tomorrow could make me the past, but that I mustn't fear. For I know deep in my mind the love of me I've left behind, and I'll be loving you always, until the day is night and night becomes the day. Always, until the trees and seas just up and fly away. Always, until the day that 8 times 8 times 8 is 4. Always, until the day that is the days that are no more. Always, until the rainbow burns the stars out in the sky. Always, until the ocean covers every mountain high. Always. Thank you very much.
Hello all, my name is Taylor. I am currently in Seattle, Washington on Duwamish land. Today I will be speaking of spoken word poetry called Land of the Free. It will be accompanying a song by Archie Shepp, who is a fire musician of the 1960s and 1970s, whose music was created to incite revolution inside of revolutionaries. So without further ado. Land of the free, home of the brave, yet they taking all our people, locking children away, tearing apart families so they can get paid. Say we abolished slavery, that ain't the case. We just gave it a new face. That's the American way. And y'all always got something to say. Talking about our daddies when you took them away, leaving babies without fathers, mommies with no babes. Talking about our daddies, leaving babies without fathers, mommies with no babes. Not a broken system, it was built that way. The exception to crime lets them keep slaves. That's why we super predators before we come to age. Ayanna Jones, say their name. Tamir Rice, say their name. Cameron Prescott, say their name. Michael Brown, say their name. Jorge Tapia, say their name. Sierra Meyer, say their name. Antoine Rose, say their name. Cameron Prescott, say their name. Vonder Myers, say their name. John Albers, say their name. Tyre King, say their name. Jesse James Romero, say their name. Legend Smalls, you shot a child in the brain, but you're still not taking blame. You say that you're brave, but you putting children in graves. This ain't the land of the free, we in a police state. Now listen to this. Your founding fathers fought a tyrannical government. and you love them for it. But all this BLM shit, just some criminals burning down businesses. We're not listening to that nonsense anymore. Say it with me now. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Can't even get it out your mouth. The thing is, when we're free, you're free too. The degradation of your people is not a political view. We're both oppressed. They're just using your hate as a tool. I'm not trying to make you radical, just humanizing truth. United we stand to save our country from totalitarian hands, to save our states from its legacy of sin, to free all men, women, theys and thens, our Black Americans, our Indigenous peoples of the Northwest Hemisphere, our disabled community, our youth, our Latinx community, our undocumented community, our working class community, our elderly community, our Asian community, our formerly incarcerated community, our LGBTQIA+ community, our houseless community, our laborers and union workers, our mothers and fathers who work day in, day out, and still have to choose between feeding their children or putting a roof over their head. And for anyone else who has been marginalized or disenfranchised by this sick-ass system, I'm speaking to you. The Constitution that was written for rich white men, you're gonna feel that shit too. United we stand. In the words of James Baldwin, we cannot be free until they are free. If you know, you know.
Thank you, Taylor. So my name is Kasima. I am a student at Levin School studying governance theory and practices. I am here to recite several civic oaths taken by our electeds. I solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and will obey the laws of the United States and of the state of Washington, that I will, in all respects, observe the provisions of the Charter and ordinances of the City of Vancouver, and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of City Council Member from the Vancouver City Council Oath. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. The oath for a United States Senator. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Washington, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of Judge of the Supreme Court of the State of Washington to the best of my ability. Washington State Supreme Court Judge Oath. I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform non-combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by the law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by the law, and that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. The Naturalization Oath for American Citizenship. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Taken from the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Oof. Thank you all so much. These oaths and pledges are heavy. Maybe they sound familiar. Maybe this is your first time hearing them. I'm of an age where saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school was a daily and normal thing. Like a lot of you, I wasn't really taught what the words mean. I just knew that I was supposed to put my hand over my heart and recite them. These oaths say a lot beyond the words that are included. They tell us what we expect of our elected officials and of each other and of ourselves. They tell us different people are held to different standards. They tell us what we're supposed to do without telling us what that looks like. I want to dive into these oaths and what they mean. For the purpose of our next few minutes together, I just want to define a few terms so we can all be on the same page. This could be a very dry academic speech, but instead I really want to focus on what these words mean for our community. And differentiating between the public and the private sector, I mean public to be primarily funded by tax dollars and providing service. This includes charitable nonprofits like Giving Closet, our state government, our county government. The private sector would be organizations and businesses that are for profit and based on a business structure that's privately run. This would be our friends at Burgerville, Dutch Bros, Nike. Similarly, when I say citizens, I'm not talking about documentation status. I mean anyone who's living here in our community. 3 of these oaths are for public officials. They're people elected to carry out a specific role and provide a specific duty. It's an interesting contrast that someone representing those of us here in Vancouver has to make a promise of what they'll do in this role, but we don't expect cashiers or CEOs to swear to do their best or uphold certain values. We generally agree that the public sector is different, that people in certain roles are held to certain standards. People making our budgets and upholding our laws have to meet certain ideals, but sometimes they don't. We also don't require all public employees to take an oath. Some jurisdictions require police officers and firefighters to take them, others don't. We have school children pledge to the flag, AmeriCorps service members swear to serve, but these oaths don't apply to everyone working in banks or people who are literally making our food. These requirements also speak to standards that are culturally enforced. We watch our elected officials take these oaths, but what do these expectations mean for our community? Culturally, we have a representation problem. This is reflected in both the public and private sector. We all know some people might bristle at the idea that a system or environment is inherently inequitable, but it's important to identify barriers like structural racism because we can't solve problems that we don't see. While there's a movement toward change, there's a possibility that organizations see diversity and inclusion as another fad and will move on without getting caught up. I think most commonly when people think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, people want to jump to race, but there's a lot of representation lacking from economic and geographic diversity, people of different abilities, gender identities, and other identity spaces that we move in. While there's a lot being done in our nonprofits and charitable entities, there's also a lot of white saviorism and tokenism. People may mean well, but since so many of our organizations serve our vulnerable populations, we have an obligation to protect those that are already disenfranchised. We can start to decolonize our organizations by rooting out the things that prevent us from diversifying staff and programs that shape how we make those decisions. I think I've said this in every Civic Saturday, but our organizations and government are made of people. Unlike people, they're not free of criticism. Being unwilling and close to change or the perspective of others creates environments where real leadership or change are unable to thrive. Organizations and people that may mean well can continue to displace and reshape our communities because their goals are still wrapped in the cultural framework that causes the problems they're trying to fix. The phrase "do no harm" is often attributed to the Hippocratic Oath. This is the expectation of doctors, which many of us know they can fall short on. There's no equivalent of this oath for the public sector. While our elected officials have to swear in, the majority of employees in the public sector don't. Like the private sector, there's no expectation of doing no harm or upholding certain ideals. It's an unspoken cultural expectation that sometimes has to be said out loud. The people carrying out our programs are just as vital to keeping democracy running, and we're only human. Thinking that any one of us is above criticism isn't going to solve our problems. We're also not going to solve problems by patting ourselves on the back for being here. Allyship is important, but you don't get a gold star for doing it. It should be the expectation. There's always going to be reasons that make intersectionality or people's identities or experiences seem like less of a priority. But by making space for understanding each other's experiences, we can better problem solve together. People have spent a lot of time talking about the equity lens, but equity isn't a lens. It's not something that can be taken off or put on the end of a process to try to make pieces fit. Equity is a process. And by not dedicating the resources to equity, inclusion, or diversity, we're saying our money and our time are better spent without it. Equity should be a part of every step, the same way we look at the bottom line in or our final goal in hiring, choosing leadership, and measuring impact. How we fund the public sector also shapes who even gets to serve. The highest paid state employee in nearly every state, including here in Washington, isn't the governor or our legislators. It's the state college's football coach who takes no oath, proposes no budgets, and is not accessible to the average Washingtonian. In 2019, the WSU football coach was paid nearly $4 million, almost $1 million more than its counterpart at UW. That same year, our governor made $183,000, and many of our state legislators made close to $58,000. Our Vancouver City Council members made $2,045 per month, or $24,540 the entire year. You may think that makes sense. After all, these roles are paid with tax dollars. If the salaries are low, that means there's more money for other budget items. But we all know $25,000 doesn't go very far in this city. And $58,000 becomes a lot less when you factor having to live in Olympia for 2 to 3.5 months every year. By keeping public sector wages uncompetitive with private sector jobs, we shape who even gets to be in public service. Someone who takes these jobs knowing that they can make more money working for Microsoft or Amazon is usually already financially stable. They can take a job that requires them to move for part of the year or work long hours for low wages. It's also part of what put money in politics. You don't just have to fund a campaign to run, you have to then find a way to pay your bills once you get there. When we live in a city that has increasingly younger people who rent and have loans, it's hard to be able to afford a seat at the table. There's lots of places where renting and paying down a loan on $58,000 a year isn't feasible. AmeriCorps Wages, which provides services to organizations across the country and give people an opportunity to serve their community, requires members to live at poverty wages. This fundamentally makes the opportunity unavailable to many people who don't have a financial safety net and can't spend the term working for a little money. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, a congressional representative from New York, elected at age 29, talked about being unable to afford her rent in Washington, D.C. until her first paycheck, because that's what it looks like when you don't have the financial stability to sit in these positions of power. By making the public sector more financially competitive, it can make these positions more accessible for people who otherwise couldn't afford to serve the public. The quote that all budgets are moral documents is often attributed to Martin Luther King, and it's very true. Where we allocate our money shows what we care about. The programs that get funded, the people who can afford to serve, all reflect what we care about. The COVID-19 vaccine is a great example of this public service. The reason that we are all getting these vaccines for free is not because the private companies producing them are generous, but rather all of these vaccines were purchased with federal money, which is tax dollars. So this way, instead of insurance being factored in and some people paying astronomical costs and others paying less, it's all $0 because we're all contributing something. My tax dollars may go to helping someone else get vaccinated, just like somebody else's tax dollars is subsidizing me. It's a really great way for us all to get covered and get through this pandemic together. Taxes are often seen as a necessary evil, but they're a way for the government to provide services that allow us to continue to function. From our roads to our schools, our libraries and state parks and beautiful forests, it provides for all of us. In the private sector, there isn't usually the expectation of certain values to take a job beyond the ability to take that job and comply with policy. You don't have to take an oath to work for Safeway. People generally understand that you're working to pay bills. In the public sector, sometimes you may be required to be passionate about something, although burnout is very real. Maybe it feels fair to expect more people whose salaries come from tax dollars to do more. But most C-suite employees and lots of people make more money than our public sector workers. We don't expect everyone making $183,000 to have the same transparency or scrutiny. We don't even have expectations that our billionaires pay taxes in this state. High earning individuals in the private sector profit from using publicly provided infrastructure like roads, our mail, and other public transit. But they're still held to different standards. Does it come down to because one group is paid in taxpayer dollars, or because of how we as citizens expect public and private center entities to behave? I've been asking myself what accountability for everybody looks like. I haven't landed on a clear answer because it's a very complicated question. We have to think long-term and sustainably. An ends justify the means approach isn't going to get us to the future that we need. While many organizations in the public sector do what they can to serve our most vulnerable communities, it's often at the expense of employees or burnout. We need to do better, and not just do better by the employees working for small charitable organizations, but for everyone who's working a job where they're underpaid for their labor. The last year especially has shown us that the roles that are undervalued, like our teachers, our cashiers, and our agricultural workers, keep our economy and our community running. If we spent our public dollars in alignment with our values, what could our community look like? This isn't to say white saviorism and other remnants of white supremacy don't need to be weeded out in the private sector as well, but that maybe there should be a cultural alignment. It seems like this is the time to examine how employees are treated and treat each other, and how that shapes the environments that we interact in. The Pledge of Allegiance itself is contentious. It seems to be regional, whether or not that's something that grade schools still do, or at least did pre-pandemic. The Pledge of Allegiance was written by a self-identified Christian socialist in the mid-1800s. The original script of the pledge included the words, "with liberty and justice for all," despite the fact that only English-speaking men could own land and vote at the time. The pledge has changed over time. The most recent modification was in the 50s, only 70 years ago, to add the words, "under God," in response to the Red Scare and anti-communist propaganda. This is the pledge we say today, where we pledge allegiance to the flag and the republic that it represents, with liberty and justice for all. But what does this pledge mean? What does liberty and justice look like, let alone liberty and justice for all of us? Despite the fact that many of us have said this pledge, I think very few of us have lived up to it. The distinction of pledging allegiance to both the flag and what it represents is an intention that I can't wrap my head around. There's the "and" for the flag and the "and" the republic. We could pick just republic, or I suppose just the flag, but including both seems to imply that the flag carries the same weight as the republic. In talking about one nation, under God, indivisible, it's not looking at red states or blue states or indigenous land. It's saying you're swearing allegiance to this country, from here in the Northwest down to Florida, and everything messy that comes with it. That this whole nation can't be torn apart, which many of us may be doubting today. This flag that represents the genocide of Native people, a country built on slave labor, a country full of immigrants, xenophobia, and many complicated things. For some of us, it's swearing allegiance to a country and a flag that weren't made for us. I have so many questions I wish I had answers for. How do you carry out allegiance to a country that means you harm, let alone to do so with liberty and justice? And who's living up to this? Are we living in a way that carries out the allegiance, perhaps blindly, even with liberty and justice? Is this an ideal we want to carry out in our lives? And if it's not, why are we trying to? For me, the question then becomes, do we need to change something about ourselves to align with this pledge? Or do we need to change our expectations? While the words have taken a new meaning over time, the recitation of them has stayed the same. Taking an oath, like saying a prayer or reading a poem, is a ritual. It's an act of witness and promise and intent. We have our rituals. Some of them give us comfort. Others may be subconscious. I know I have my routine that I have for my most effective start to the day and the ritual I use to unplug after work. We have civic rituals like voting, or maybe you're going to go to the farmer's market at a short park now that it's open. Maybe you're part of the community garden. I can't tell you how to feel about the Pledge of Allegiance or an oath of office, but I think the things that we say should be examined. If we want these words to have a shared meaning as a community, we need to agree on what these words mean. If we want the ritual of taking an oath or swearing to protect and serve or do no harm to mean something, they have to be accompanied by actions. The oath itself is just words if we're not willing to put in the work. It's hard to say we're carrying out allegiance to this country with liberty and justice when many of us are just trying to survive the pandemic. It's hard to say that we're embodying the liberty and justice the pledge requires of us when we're saying that systematic problems or climate disasters are too big of a problem. It's not real liberty or justice for all when some people can walk away from a cause while others face the consequences. So how do we make meaning? How do we update or create rituals that are meaningful, that have the words and the intent, but also the actions that they require? I like to think that being here today is some sort of ritual. I hope we're able to connect and find something in some kind of meaning, but it is the big questions of, do the words need changing or do our actions? Or is it both? Is it time for us to create something new, something more representative of what's expected of us? People can be well-meaning, but that doesn't mean they're our best leaders. I know lots of people set out to do good in their careers and get sidetracked. Bills and deadlines and stress pile up, and you're not thinking about if you're carrying yourself with liberty and justice for all when you're cooking dinner or commuting. But you have to ask yourself the question and be comfortable with the answer. Sometimes we do fall short. Nobody likes to be criticized, but if we're not open to the hard truths, we're not going to grow. It's not the act of taking the oath that holds someone responsible. Some people don't take an oath, but do the work to carry out the actions that the words were made for. We probably don't all agree on what liberty and justice looks like, let alone liberty and justice for everyone. I do know we don't get to pick and choose the structural biases that suit us, but have to be willing to dispose of the whole thing if it actually means liberty and justice as promised. We also heard the Naturalization Oath for New Americans. This oath is different from the others. It's more detailed. It requires the oath taker to renounce any and all other countries. It highlights that how high our expectations are of immigrants and how different they are. The Naturalization Oath asks more from any other speaker than the Pledge of Allegiance does. It's a higher burden of expectation. It is also the only other oath that asks for true faith to a country that may not give you the same. I can think of a few things in my life that I can act on in true faith. This is perhaps an example of allegiance, but also erasure. To expect people to meet these expectations at any age is another way to highlight how much more is expected of immigrants. We don't ask anyone else to renounce things, whether it's crime or acts of terror or commitments like we do our immigrants. It may seem like a small price to pay to say these words to become American, but these are commitments that even natural-born Americans struggle with as well, and remind us that there is othering and different in not being born here. So we have to decide, do we hold ourselves and others to the oaths, or do we change what our expectations should be? These oaths all talk about what we're supposed to do. There's nothing in these oaths about what we get in return or why we do them. Generally, we agree. We want to live in a society. We want to have our friends and our neighbors. We all want to be safe and healthy. And to do all of that takes work. Saying we believe in these things doesn't get the job done. I've misread and misjudged and thought people saying words of allyship were going to show their support with actions and been disappointed when they haven't. This work has to be ongoing, not just as a community, but for each of us individually. Liberty and justice are a process. These oaths are also an opportunity for us to reflect on our values and actions. Are we upholding the things that are important to us? Are we carrying out the values that we care about? Are we pursuing our lives with liberty and justice for everyone? And if we're not, what is it that's stopping us? Are there rituals that help us recharge and focus? It feels more clear-cut in the private sector. If you don't like a business's values, you can choose not to buy from them. but we don't all have the privilege of getting to pick where we buy from. And if you don't want to support a big retailer because of their environmental or social stances, you may not have a lot of options. In the public sector, we're usually willing to wait for someone's term to be up or follow the budget process and provide input. Sometimes it's easy to pick what's easy over what we believe in. But if we want our institutions, both public and private, to serve us, they need to reflect our values. We've probably all made some kind of promise or oath that we failed to live up to. We haven't all been sworn in as an elected official or taken an oath promising to uphold certain morals, but we can all do our best. We can create rituals with meaning and use our actions to show what our values are. It's easy to say it's someone else's problem or responsibility, but we have to hold ourselves and each other responsible. We can't say if no one else is going to do the work, no one should. And living the words of a pledge are a conscious choice that we have to make every day. It's up to us to shape where we want to go from here. And putting words to our values has power. To be able to articulate and act on things that are important to us is critical. If you can't say where you're going, it's going to be very hard to get there. I hope that there are words that embody the things that you care about that you can reflect on this weekend. And I hope we can build our own community and continue to grow with liberty and justice for all of us. Thank you.
Well, okay, that's a tough act to follow, Alyssa. Incredibly important words and so much to think about, really. And in a way, it kind of makes me think of this next song, this closing song that we talked about in a kind of a different way. That, you know, this is that so much of what we choose about ourselves and the way that we live in the world is a process. And to reach that kind of clarity where we can be who we need to be to communicate those ideas and values is not always easy, but very important. And so I will sing a song from an early 1960s musical in which a psychiatrist is treating a woman who discovers that she is the reincarnation of an ancient duchess, and the psychiatrist falls in love with the ancient duchess and not her. She was played by Barbara Streisand in the movie. I can't believe that this song could be so salient even still today with that history, but indeed it is. So, so thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. And we can all go to the mental campfire now. On a clear day, rise and look around you, and you'll see who you are. On a clear day, how it will astound you that the glow of your being outshines every star you feel part of, every mountain, sea, and shore you can hear from far and near, a world you've never heard before. And on a clear day, on that clear day, you can see forever and ever and ever more. Thank you.
Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in and for joining us today. Thank you again to all the great people that made this gathering happen and sharing their talents. I hope you all sign up for the link in the comments and join us over on the Civic Circles and Zoom, where we're going to head over right now. Thanks again for tuning in.